Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grant Writing 101. We're going to wait a couple of minutes to get started. And while you're waiting, if you'd like to introduce yourself, list your name, organization, and one thing you'd like to learn during this webinar in the chat. Thanks. Well, welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. If you're just joining us, we're writing our names, organization, and a thing you'd like to learn from this webinar in the chat. Thanks, Danith. We're happy to have you here today. And Leslie, great. Hi, Kate. Hello, everyone. Welcome. If you're just joining us, please write your name, your organization, and one thing you'd like to learn from this webinar in the chat, and we'll get started in just a minute. Awesome. Okay. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Well, welcome everyone to Grant Writing 101. This webinar is intended to share helpful approaches to writing conservancy grant proposals. Although this is a conservancy-focused grants writing webinar, some of the topics we present today may be applicable to other grant programs administered by other agencies. Please see their program requirements as needed. Next slide, please. Here's a look at the topics we'll be covering today. We're going to do a quick intro and key takeaways about the SCC, project eligibility, goals and objectives, describing your project, other sections, tasks and budget, and a summary. Next slide. There will be 3 of us presenting the webinar today. I'm Morgan Wright, and I'm a North Coast Project Manager.
And I'm Virgilio Quasai. I'm a project manager with the San Francisco Bay program.
I'm Helen Warner with the South Coast. I'm a project manager. I also want to introduce Sarah Haugen and Katie Nichols, also from the Conservancy, who are helping us with tech and with the chat. So you have some good representation from the Conservancy here today.
Great, thanks everyone. During the webinar, we will be conducting a few polls to make things more fun. We will be using Poll Everywhere, and we'll share the link and QR code later in the presentation. We do have over 300 people registered for this webinar, and so that may limit our ability to answer questions. If you do have a question, though, please type it into the Q&A. We will do our best to answer questions as they come in. At the end of the webinar, we'll continue to answer questions that come in, again, on the Q&A, and we'll provide an FAQ document with unanswered questions at the end. We'll email it out to participants, and this webinar will be recorded and posted on our website in a couple of days. Next slide. All right, so here are the 3 thesis statements of the webinar. If you're going to remember anything, just remember these 3 things. So the first is answer the question and only the question. This also includes following any length guidance that you are given. The second is be concise, and be concise. We maybe should have only put 1 be concise, but be concise. Assume the reader is going to only read 1 to 2 sentences of your answer. Be specific, quantitative, and concise. And then finally, tell us what the project is and do not oversell your project. Next slide. Since this is a conservancy-focused webinar, we'll give a short intro about us so you can determine if your projects are a good fit for our funding. The Coastal Conservancy is a state agency established in 1976 to protect, improve natural lands and waterways, to help people get to and enjoy the outdoors, and to sustain local economies along California's coast and throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. Our projects often have multiple benefits, including restoring and enhancing wildlife habitat on the coast, protecting open space and creating parks and trails, improving water quality, and preparing communities for the impacts of climate change. Next slide. When applying to any grant program, it is key to know your funder, including the agency's basic mission and goals, and any specific grant program focus and priorities. And you want to do this prior to starting your grant application. The Conservancy funds a variety of projects along the coast, San Francisco Bay, and in coastal watersheds, including land acquisition projects, planning and design for habitat restoration projects, trail projects, and projects that address climate change impacts. We do not fund operation and maintenance activities. Most Conservancy grants are awarded through a rolling pre-application solicitation. This includes climate ready, wildfire resilience, and other regional grant programs. Explore the Coast and some other grant programs are not awarded through this rolling process. To learn more about the Explore the Coast grant program and key dates, please visit our website, and Katie will drop a link to that program in the chat. We apply funding sources to projects, so you don't have to apply to a particular funding source. Generally, make sure that the funder's time frames for the grant, funding and required match amounts, location, habitat types, and species all fit within your proposed project. For example, for an implementation project, the Conservancy requires that environmental documentation is complete and permits are in progress. And if you need help determining this, next slide, please. Don't be afraid to contact us. Please reach out if you have a proposed project. Email the regional manager for your region and include a 1 to 2 sentence description of your project. Our North Coast is Del Norte County to Coastside, Sonoma, and Marin counties, and the contact is Joel Gerwine. For the San Francisco Bay Area, that includes the 9 Bay Area counties, excluding the coastside of Sonoma, Marin, and San Mateo counties. And the contact is Jessica Davenport. For the Central Coast, coastside San Mateo County to Santa Barbara County is Trish Chapman. And the South Coast, Ventura County to San Diego County, including Riverside and San Bernardino counties as well, is Megan Cooper. Additionally, we also have a new technical assistance program where we help develop your idea into a successful project. Check out our website to learn more and apply, and Katie will drop that link into the chat as well. And next slide, please. Okay. Remember to review all of the selection criteria several times throughout the grant writing process to confirm that they have all been addressed within the application. Addressing all the listed selection criteria is essential to scoring high enough to qualify for funding. A tip, while writing your application to ensure that each criterion is addressed, is to write the number of each criterion next to the sentence that addresses that criterion. This way, you can see that each criterion is being addressed. Remember to delete the numbers before submitting your proposal. And we will as well drop a link to the Conservancy project selection criteria in the chat. Next slide, please. One of the Conservancy's criteria is project includes a serious effort to engage tribes. And consideration for this criterion includes respecting tribal knowledge and concerns, incorporating Indigenous voices and perspectives into the project, and engaging with tribes that are traditionally and culturally affiliated to the project area. We are now going to do our first poll. Again, we'll be using Poll Everywhere, and Katie will drop a link to the poll in the chat. You can also scan the QR code on the screen with your phone, and we'll give everyone a couple of seconds to set this up. And we'll give you a couple of seconds to work on the poll as well. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. The poll should be live. We're going to give everyone maybe 30 seconds to work on this. Okay, great. We're already getting some responses. Nice. Maybe 15 more seconds. Got some answers in 1, 2, and 3. Okay, looks like maybe the answers are dropping off a little bit, so we'll go ahead and move on. So for option 1, the project only engaged tribes after a record search was conducted. We like to see engagement early in project development. Option 2 is an okay example, but isn't showing us that there's ongoing tribal consultations or leadership opportunities. Option 3 for this example is the best example and tells us that there's continued communication, engagement, and partnership within the project. Thanks everyone for participating. We're going to head back into the presentation momentarily and jump into goals and objectives. Project goals and objectives should be developed before writing the proposal. Goals are broad, overarching principles that guide decision making. A goal may be aspirational and somewhat vague. Objectives are specific, measurable steps that can be taken to make progress towards the goal. Objectives will help you develop your project tasks, which Kellen will talk about later in the presentation. Next slide, please. We wanted to share an example of a goal and objectives. It's a good idea to have multiple objectives, keeping them simple and specific. So in this case, the goal is to restore a resilience complex of wetlands in the Cannibal Island unit as part of a larger regional effort to restore the Eel River estuary. Some example objectives of this are to excavate 15,000 feet of new interior channels by December 31st, 2027, remove degraded water control structures, and remove invasive Spartina within a 60-acre treatment area. And next slide, and I will pass it off to Virgilio.
Hello, everyone. So the most important thing you need to do when writing a grant application is to describe your project well. One thing you can know for sure is that if the person reviewing your grant is confused, the project won't get funded. So you must be clear and concise. A useful tip for answering a question is to simply repeat the question, add because, and write your answer. While you won't get a chance to demonstrate your poetic skills, you'll provide the funder with a clear and direct answer to their question using this format. We recommend using plain language for increased clarity and accessibility. Readers should be able to easily understand what the project will do the first time they read the project description. The Cal HR website provides helpful plain language guidance, and the website is shown on the screen, and we'll drop the link in the chat too. Next slide. Make sure your reviewers know what the project is and why it should be done from the very first sentence. Get straight to the point or core of the project. Are you going to prepare a plan, acquire a piece of property, build a trail, or restore a wetland? Remember the 3 main takeaways. Answer the question and only question. Be concise and tell us what the project is. No matter how complicated your project is, you need to be able to describe the core of your project and why it should be done in 1 or 2 sentences. You can get into the details and nuances later, but you need to start with the most important facts right at the beginning. It's very important to be able to describe the core facts of your project. We want to share a helpful exercise to do before starting your grant proposal. Try taking your project description that you may have in hand, whatever length or format you have it, and then paring it down to 1 paragraph. And then to 1 sentence that really communicates the most important elements of your project. If you can do this, you can return to this paragraph sentence, and again, while you're writing your grant proposal, to make sure you're focused and clear. What you see on screen there is the formula for developing this sentence. So please take a moment to read the paragraph at the bottom, or the sentence rather. In this one sentence, we managed to capture the who, what, where, and why of the project. If your reviewer only read the first paragraph, they would still get the gist of the project. Next slide. So naming your project is also important, and this is one tip, or a few tips from us. You're going to want to keep it short and simple. 6 words is a good maximum. From the grant agency's perspective, the project name is going to be used in forms, databases, reports, etc. It needs to be usable, which means no colons. You've probably been told to use colons in academic papers, but don't use them in grant writing. Start with a place name if you can, and convey the core essence of what the project is, such as wetland restoration plan or trail plan. If possible, be memorable, but don't do this at the expense of being short and simple and conveying the basic gist of your project. Slide. So going back to the key takeaways, remember to answer your question, be concise, and tell us what the project is. Do not oversell your project. Next slide. So for the project description section of the application, you're going to want to explain your project to application reviewers. Assume reviewers aren't familiar with your project and they only have a limited amount of time to digest the details of your application. To that end, describe the specific problem you're trying to solve. This is the what in the equation. Next, you'll want to include information about the affected parties so that we know who's impacted by the problem. You also need to add location information to illustrate where the problem's occurring. You'll need to state the time frame to define when the problem has been happening or is happening. Finally, you'll need to describe the outcomes of the project in both quantitative and qualitative ways. Make sure you review the RFP, project selection criteria, and SCC strategic plan. Tie key themes in those documents to your proposed project, but don't regurgitate that language without supporting information. Next slide. As mentioned in the previous slide, you're going to want to be clear or provide a clear picture of the location of the project. Include pertinent information about the project site and its existing conditions. Examples of that include habitat types and conditions, presence of special status species, current public access amenities, connectivity to existing and planned trails and open space, and adjacent land uses if they impact the project. Reviewers will want to gain a better understanding of the communities who will benefit or experience impacts from the project. To do this, provide a brief community demographic profile, including socioeconomic and housing information. For instance, if the project consists of building a park or a trail in an urban area, give us information about the communities that live within a half-mile radius of the site. All of this information will be used to determine if a project is well sited. Next slide. So demonstrating the need for the project is also crucial to a successful application because it supports all the actions from the proposed project. Describe the specific problem, issue, or unserved need that the project will address. In most cases, this section can be done well in one paragraph. Focus on the project and minimize discussion of broader regional issues. Examples of project need include lack of public access, damaged or non-functional habitat, lack of protections for coastal resources, sea level rise risks and the need for adaptation measures, improve resilience to wildfire, or a regional trail gap in a systemically excluded community. Don't use this section to describe how the project will address the problem, issue, or uncertain need. This section, in addition to the site description, will help provide the needed context to help reviewers properly evaluate your proposal. Next slide. So this is the next poll. And this is the very first paragraph, project needs section that we received in the past. We know this is a long paragraph to read, but read it pretty quickly and also pretend you have 40 more just like it to read to really see it from our perspective. To that end, I'll give you a minute to read and then I'll show you some possible project needs for this project, and you'll select the best one. Okay, let us know if you need more time, but Morgan, would you mind pulling up the poll? So these are selections of project need that can be derived from this paragraph. So please select the one that you think best fits. Okay. Looks like responses have tapered off. So it looks like most of you picked reduced bacteria in impaired water bodies. However, the actual project need for this project was improved water quality in Big City Creek. The problem is the funder, as a funder, when we got to the end of the paragraph, we had no idea what the actual project need was because that was kind of explained further in the application. So for this paragraph, it doesn't mention the site name of Big City Creek. So it's important that you follow our guidance for project need. Next slide. So once you demonstrated the need for the project, you'll then focus on describing the solution to the problem. In this section, you'll describe the full set of proposed activities that are designed to address the identified problem. For instance, if a tract of land containing important natural resources is in danger of project development, then you can describe how acquiring the property will protect it from that risk. Please describe the full scope of work for a project, including but not limited to timelines, community-led planning tasks, environmental review, specific actions during the construction phase. If your proposal is for a planning project and you perform some preliminary planning work, describe the work completed up to the time of the application and outline the remaining work that the grant is intended to fund. If the project is shovel-ready, describe the specific actions such as earth moving or signage installation that are expected to be completed through the grant. All activities must be feasible and designed to achieve the project's overarching goals. You can always refer to our application guide for a short list of sample activities if needed. Next slide. And now for the outcomes. Now that you've discussed the problem, its location, and proposed solutions, you can define your expected outcomes. These are the quantitative and qualitative measures your project is designed to achieve. Examples of quantitative outcomes are numbers of acres restored for restoration projects or conceptual design up to 30% for planning projects. While examples of qualitative outcomes are habitat functions restored or integration of community input into project designs. Listing the specific outcomes of your project will demonstrate impact, enhance credibility, and ensures that the project aligns with the program priorities and meets evaluation criteria. Applications should clearly explain what, for example, restoration will mean for the project. If the project is intended to remove levees to restore a creek's connection with a floodplain, the application should also specify that connecting to the floodplain will lead to increased infiltration, which could lead to more flow in the creek in the summer, and that the project will increase riparian habitat, which will then increase shading, decrease water temperature, and facilitate an increase in larger woody debris and aquatic habitat, leading to complexity in a creek. Now here's Kellen for the remainder of the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Rogelio. Catherine, with your hand up, I do want to acknowledge that we see your hand up. We're doing questions all at the end just because there are like 130 people in this webinar. So we are hoping some of your questions will be answered as we go. But if you want to ask it in the Q&A box in the meantime, we have staff who would be happy to answer it now. I also want to acknowledge the lag. Sarah's doing a great job. I think we have too many pictures. So sorry about that weird lag between our slides. Okay, so we have some additional project description tips that will help you with this section around specificity. So you want to start local, not global. So for example, if your project is to restore degraded wetlands, don't start by saying that California has lost 90% of its wetlands, even though that's true. Start with what's wrong at that particular wetland that you want to restore, and then later you can put that in the larger context if that's helpful. And then also, Virgilio mentioned this, but it's important to quantify the need and or the benefits by being numeric. So anytime you can add a number to something, that's nice and tangible and measurable, and we love it. It's also helpful to address whether your project meaningfully advances statewide goals or local and regional plans. So you want to be sure to describe the specifics on how your project will advance the plan. Some example of statewide goals or local and regional plans are Outdoor for All from 2023, the California Water Action Plan, the San Francisco Estuary Blueprint from 2022, the State of California Sea Level Rise Guidance, 2024 Science and Policy Update, and many, many more. We have a handy list on our website at the link on the screen, and we'll also throw it in the chat as well. All right. I don't have any polls in my section, but I do have animated lists, so everyone get excited. There are many other sections within the grant proposal that we don't have time to get into today, but everything we've already discussed applies to those other sections. Some of them will be where you provide detailed information that you didn't include in your project description or project need. However, even when answering detailed questions, you should still be concise and direct. And remember to be consistent in your language by using the keywords that you identified as important in the beginning of your grant writing process. And don't be afraid to reiterate key themes when appropriate. But then on the flip side, we don't want applicants to just regurgitate the language from the RFP. As we discussed earlier in the presentation, applicants will need to describe specifics of the project, like how the project benefits systemically excluded communities and provide decision-making power, or how the project will reduce wildfire risk to nearby communities and public lands. Number 3, while on the subject of repeating the language of the RFP, we wanted to provide some guidance on artificial intelligence, or AI. We recognize that the integration of AI can serve as a valuable tool for all of us to improve efficiency. And AI usage in application submission has been apparent, but unfortunately not in a positive way. It's been notable in the use of repetitious phrases and standardized language from our website and priorities that the Conservancy lists with little to no supporting claims. So while it can be a helpful tool, it should not replace essential human elements of creativity and skill. And in our experience, AI written applications are generally not very competitive. So we're seeking compelling proposals that not only align with goals and priorities, but also effectively articulate your work well for the communities you aim to serve. And then the last one, just wanted to say you should highlight support by others, and especially if you have a broad range of support for your project. Think if you have academic partners or folks in academia are excited about what you're doing, community groups that are going to be impacted by your work or partners, or just think what you're doing is amazing, legislators, whoever is on board, that bolsters your application quite a bit. Okay, so in the project description section, you listed the project activities, a big picture summary of what will be done. And then in this section, you should specify the details or the tasks of how these activities will be carried out. After you've described your project and project need, you need to tell the funder how you will accomplish those objectives. This is done by developing your clear task list and is another challenge that grant writers face. The task should tell the funder what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and how long it's going to take. So let's go through some examples, kind of Goldilocks style. Okay, so this is a list of tasks that is way too detailed. Many of the tasks could be combined into more general categories. For instance, tasks 1 through 3 of reporting, direct admin, and contract admin could all be combined into one task. All right, so this example isn't detailed enough. What does implementation mean? Is that just construction costs? Does it include implementation of the education and outreach components as well? This task needs more details. And as I'm sure you can figure out, this slide is the just right. This is a well-balanced task list that goes into enough detail that we feel like the buckets make sense, but not so much detail that we're inundated with too many tasks. So once you've defined your tasks, you need to tell the funder how much each task will cost. Everyone's favorite part, the budget. As a reviewer, I am looking to a budget to answer these main questions. What will the grant money be spent on? Here we want to see a summary budget that gives a good sense of how much of the budget is going to project management versus construction versus education versus monitoring, all your different tasks. And are the project costs reasonable and justifiable? We want to see a budget justification that gives some indication of the basis of project costs. And it helps to see a budget or multiple budgets, depending on the format of the application, that answers both of those questions. So here's an example of a summary budget. Although it's divided into more general tasks than what we would recommend, for this example, they're easy to understand and give a good overall sense of where grant money will be spent. So remember to make sure that the tasks in your budget exactly correspond to the tasks in your narrative project description. And then you also want to use round numbers in the summary budget like this. We know the budget will probably change a bit before going under contract, but at this stage, we want to have just a very general idea of cost. And the summary budget is also a good place to show other funding secured for the project. You can also show those funds in a separate table if you don't want to assign them to specific tasks. In addition to the budget table, I'm just going to talk over the lag. You will want to provide at least a little limited budget justification. You should provide an explanation of the costs for each of the project tasks that will be charged to the Conservancy grant. The budget justification should give reviewers a sense of what costs each budget line will cover. Please list by task what the cost breakdown is, including estimated labor hours, any materials that will be purchased, or additional costs that your project will have. Additionally, if your project includes other funding sources that you've applied for but haven't secured yet, you should explain any contingency plans in case that doesn't come through. So are there other grants you're going to go after, or can the project be implemented in phases? Funders understand that you don't always have all your funding in place when you apply, but we also don't want to tie up grant funds for a project that might not be implemented anytime soon. And the RFP should tell you if certain costs are not allowable. For example, state bond funds can't be spent on operations and maintenance, while it may be a reasonable project cost. If it's not allowable for the grant program, it's not allowable. The grant programs funded by state bonds. So many grant programs, including the Conservancies, also allow indirect costs or overhead to be included, but there are often specific rules or caps on how to charge overhead or indirect. You may need to have an improved indirect cost rate, and you may only be able to charge indirect on certain categories like staff time. Okay, we're reaching the end. I've only got a few more slides before we can get into Q&A. So here's a list. Sarah, get ready. Pre-submission best practices list. Okay, start early. Make sure to allow time to create or secure all of the required info, maps, photos, all that jazz. And make sure to reach out to any project partners that you mentioned in the application early. Sometimes partners seem shocked they were included in a grant application when they're awarded funding. So make sure, even if you're not able to start paying until once you're awarded that funding and don't want to, collaborate until you can pay them, make sure they at least know and are game if you are awarded funding. Follow the instructions, things like page length, how many paragraphs to use to describe things, all that jazz. I've said that twice. Answer all of the questions, address all of the selection criteria, and remember for that, there might not necessarily be a question that says, address this criteria, just this criteria. Some you'll have to include in your answers to other questions, and we'll be looking for that as we review the application. Define all acronyms. And lastly, accept track changes and remove any notes to yourself. And we're going to, once again, have our take-home points. Be sure to answer the question, be concise, and tell us what the project is, and do not oversell your project. And I'm going to be repetitive again and say, don't be afraid to contact us. Here's our friendly staff on the screen. We want to talk to you about your projects. Here's the project information for the regional managers, which we'll share out afterwards. And then we also want to give you some additional resources. I saw that a lot of you were interested in learning more about Prop 4 funding. We have a whole webpage and webinar with more resources. So there's a link for that for about Prop 4. We also have our technical assistance webpage if you want to apply for additional technical assistance for writing your grant. And we have a very robust grant application guide. So thank you so much for joining this webinar. Oh, cool. We have 20 minutes for Q&A. Because it's a big group, we know we won't probably be able to get to all of your questions in time before we have to end the webinar. So we'll compile all the questions and send it out as an FAQ. I will also send out the presentation slides and links to the resources. So I'll turn it over to Katie, who's going to be in charge of Q&A.
Thank you, everyone, for all the questions coming in. The main question was I've seen so far was, will this be recorded and shared. So we are recording this webinar. We're going to post the slides and the recording online on our website, along with a compiled frequently asked questions. I had a request to see the last slide again. We put the contact info and the links in the chat, but we can go back and share the last slide again if that is still needed. The other question, please use the Q&A feature, but I see one in the chat. Julie asked, can you say more about not overselling your project?
Yeah, I can start, and then Virgilio and Kellen can chime in too if I miss anything. I would just say, along with our key takeaways, being concise and not over exaggerating, adding too much irrelevant information about your project would be helpful. Virgilio, I don't know if that answers the question, but Kellen, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think you got it, Morgan. Sometimes we see repetitive phrases, and that's sort of an indication of trying to oversell a point. So going back to the guidance, be concise. We pick up on a lot of the information that's presented in these applications. And yeah, I think that's a gist of it. Kellen, do you have anything else to add?
Nope, you both covered it. I think being really clear about what you're actually going to do using the grant funding. I think sometimes folks get into like, this is all the stuff we do or all the stuff we could do, and just be very clear, like, this is what we are going to do if we are awarded this funding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question from Kelly in the Q&A. WCB is currently paused accepting pre-applications for Prop 4 projects. Is the Coastal Conservancy still accepting pre-applications for Prop 4 funds? Yes, we are. The reason for the WC pause is likely about the legislation that came with Prop 4. We are actively working on that, and the Conservancy is still accepting pre-applications and hoping to disperse Prop 4 funding as soon as we are able to.
Thanks, Katie.
Another question from the chat. What type of grants have been submitted in the past year? I think that is a pretty difficult question for us to answer because we get a lot of applications by region. Sonia, I think you put that question in the chat. If you have a specific project in a specific region and you're curious if we've already funded something like that in the past, the best way to ask about that and propose what you're looking into would be to contact one of our regional managers. Another question, is this a good funding source for preparation of Cal VTP that covers roughly 8,000 acres? I think I'm familiar with Cal VTP, but does anyone else want to take a shot at that one?
That deals
It's
with
a little
wildfire, and I believe we've already there's a separate allocation for wildfire projects, if I'm not mistaken, and we've already decided where those funds are going to go. But I think it's not a bad idea to reach out to us directly to tell us more about the project.
Yeah, and about the previous questions about the types of projects we fund and what's been funded, I saw someone else put in the chat, you can also look at our board meeting materials. So every board meeting has links to the type of projects we propose to our board and what has been funded. So that's another resource to see examples for types of projects we fund. Let's see.
And I added a link to the Wildfire Resilience Program in the chat. Just going back to Judy's question about the CalVTP, so that might be helpful too.
Another question from Jess, is climate technology potentially interesting as a project for the Conservancy, specifically autonomous vehicles for restoration? Well, that is definitely interesting. I think we don't typically fund research and development, so we have some restrictions regarding what we can and can't fund in terms of that. But if there's approved methods that are connected to a direct restoration project, it could be eligible. Does anyone else want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it, Katie. Especially with our latest funding source, Prop 4, we're focusing on projects that are going to lead to some type of implementation project at some point. So research and development wouldn't lead to that, at least in the short term.
Okay, I'm seeing the chat and the Q&A. I saw one project question. It looks like it's been answered by Celine about a surf event that involves local indigenous tribes and environmental studies opportunities. That sounds like it could be a good fit for our Explore the Coast program. So definitely look into that one. And I see the resources in the chat for that. Okay, another question. Shanda asks, do you have suggestions for the types of quantitative metrics to include for applications focused on planning and design? Would the Conservancy want to see metrics related to future construction in that application? Does anyone on the team want to take that one? I'll take a stab at it and people can add to it. So if it's a planning project, you might not already have metrics related to what the future construction outcomes would be. However, I think if you can focus on the area that has potential for restoration, rather than maybe the exact alternatives if they're not developed yet, I would say that would be the way to address the quantitative piece for planning projects. Does anyone else want to add to that? That's kind of a tricky one.
I know for a lot of planning and design projects I manage, there is a community engagement component. Sorry, Katie, if you just said that. I was trying to do too many things at the same time, answering other questions. But in case Katie didn't say that, any metrics related to any kind of a community engagement that you're doing is great. We want to make sure any project that you have has a strong community outreach component. So there can be metrics with like how many people you reached or how many meetings you had or things like that could fit in there.
Okay, I'm going to jump up to Hannah's question in the chat. Can you speak to situations where grant funding is tied to a location? Is the program looking for projects to support activities in the region or support bringing participants to that region? How should a program go about applications when funding is much more limited for a specific area? Speaking about ETC limitations in SF Bay area. Virgilio, do you want to touch on that one?
Yeah. Okay. How should I answer this? Well, with the San Francisco Bay Area, funds are limited under the ETC program. So we're really looking for projects that, that are going to take participants from one area, let's say East Oakland or the East Bay, and then take them out for some type of coastal adventure. Multiple questions here. Maybe Morgan, you want to add to that?
Yeah, and ETC is a unique grant program as well because our funding is just so limited, especially for the Bay Area, and that is specifically tied to the funding source. So the question is, how should a program go about applications when funding is much more limited for a specific area? Depending on where your project is, you could also go to the outer coast, for example, instead of inside the San Francisco Bay Area. A little further out, but of course we can pay for travel for the Explore the Coast. I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, and it's like we've mentioned in the past, it's a super competitive program. So really it's just meeting all our selection criteria and developing a really thoughtful and holistic program. I know, Hannah, you work for Waterside Workshops, and you all do great work. So with the SF Bay Area, it's just super competitive here.
And we are, for Explore the Coast, currently doing pre-application consultations. So you can reach out to check whether your project is a good fit for the program.
I put a link in the chat to our webinars page. There were some questions about wildfire. We gave a presentation, a webinar, and the slides and the recording from that webinar back in May are online as well. So that would be another good resource for specifics about our wildfire resilience projects. I'm going to go to the Q&A. Jason asks, we have a project that will create some data sets that will then be used for a project. Since the data set development leads to a project, does this fit into R&D, or is it okay since it's tied directly to a project? Is there guidance on budget ratio, development dollars versus project dollars? Morgan, did you want to answer that one, or like you were about to?
I'm rereading the question.
Okay.
Thanks.
So we can support some aspects of a project that are like maybe not as tied to a specific construction restoration outcome if it's really critical to the project. Like this scenario, I think it would probably be good to ask about the specifics and for this question about how much that data set development costs in terms of your entire project. And a regional manager could probably kind of look at that and see about the value of that to the overall project in the region and provide some guidance. I don't think we have a specific budget ratio that I'm aware of. Another question in the chat from Ray. Would using blue tech to assess the health of wildlife and whales near coastal habitats and marine protected areas qualify for funding? It includes community and tribal engagement. That's another one that might be tricky given our funding restrictions for Prop 4. I think the community and tribal engagement piece could qualify for funding, but assessments sometimes and more on the research side are a little bit more difficult for us to fund. Does anyone else want to add to that response? Again, sometimes it's like pretty specific to the project, and it would be great to reach out to us for the region that you're interested in, and we can provide a more detailed response based on the project. Benjamin asks for the location where we are based or where we're located. So that he's asking, do we use the location or locations where we'll provide services or where we're located? For example, our target population resides in Contra Costa, and we hope to provide services in Pismo Beach. So if the project was occurring in Pismo Beach, that would fall into the Central Coast region. But in your grant application or pre-application, you would provide that. So you would say where you are based physically and where you would provide services or where the project is. And we, to divide that among our regions, it would be by where the project is. Couple more minutes left. I don't know if we've got any more questions we haven't covered yet. Do universities such as CSU qualify?
Yes. Public agencies are eligible as grantees. Thanks for the softball. Come on, Callum, get this one.
Yes, we provide grants to nonprofits, public agencies, universities, cities, and all of that guidance about who is eligible is also on our website.
All right, it doesn't look like we have, oh, okay, cool. Doesn't look like we have any other burning questions in the last couple minutes. Oh, do we have to be in the SAMS system?
I believe that's a federal government registration, and the answer is no. But we would need your like tax information ID if it's a nonprofit, but we do not use the SAMS payment system.
I was about to wrap up and we got another question, so we'll keep going until we'll go until 1.
Nicholas asks in the chat, are chances of getting the grant better if you ask for less than the maximum amount available? I would say no. It is better to describe your project with the budget that you need and describe the costs. You do want to be conservative and not, pad the budget for costs that you don't need. But you should be clear in your application if those are the costs of the project, you should include all of them. There's always an opportunity if we have a pre-application to discuss those costs and see if maybe there's opportunities to reduce anything if we can't fund the full project or provide cost sharing. But no, I would say it's not more competitive if you're at a lower cost.
All right, we made it to 1. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be sure to follow up with this recording and slides and the resources we mentioned. We wish you good luck in your grant application journey.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.